the Team Performance Podcast with Spencer Horn and Christian Napier. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Team Performance Winning Ways for Uncertain Times podcast. I'm Christian Napier, and I'm thrilled to be joined by two very, very special guests. But before we introduce our guests, allow me to introduce my co-host, who looks like he's in Johnny Cash Black, but it could be a gray. I can't really tell here. Spencer Horn. Spencer, how are you?
Doing great, Christian. Yeah, I'm kind of matching you today. Twins today.
Well, I've got green on.
It looks great. So yeah, I'm wearing gray for sure.
All right. Yeah, it kind of looks black here on my screen. That's why I went Johnny Cash. So I don't know if you want to sing a few bars of Folsom Prison Blues or something like that, but I know you've got some musical talents.
Well, you just keep making those flames go higher, man, when you put me on the spot like that.
All right. Well, we should walk the line. I want to get right to the guests. I know we normally have some banter here at the beginning, but I'm so excited to have these guests on today because they're really, really amazing. And they've got some really interesting contributions to our topic, which is team performance, Spencer.
Yes, I'm excited too. So you know them well. Why don't you introduce them today?
All right. Well, we've got Chip Suttles on the call today, and I'm really happy to have Chip on because Chip and I worked together during the Salt Lake 2002 Olympic Winter Games, and it's been a long time since Salt Lake 2002, and Chip is now the Chief Information Officer for the Seattle Seahawks. He's the Vice President of Technology. He was recognized as the CIO of the Year in Seattle last year in the Enterprise Business category. And he has a lot of really interesting responsibilities that will allow him to talk about a little bit more. But before he worked for the Seahawks, I think he's worked there for 9 years. Is that right, Chip?
Yeah, this is my 9th season.
And before that, you worked for the Vancouver Canucks. And then before the Vancouver Canucks, you worked for VANOC, the Vancouver Organizing Committee for the Olympic Games, and you have a lot of experience in the Olympic sphere, Salt Lake being one of those stops. And Chip now lives in Seattle with his wife Lauren, and they have 2 sons and a daughter. So Chip, it's so great to have you on. Welcome to our little podcast.
Thank you, Christian. I appreciate you having me on. It was great to reconnect earlier in a recent conversation we had on the 2002 games. What a great experience that was. It's brought back all those memories. And ever since we talked, I've been thinking about it and how great a time that was in our life. And so, but happy to be here today. Look forward to our discussion. So nice to meet you, Spencer, as well.
Great to meet you. Thank you.
Well, it's so great to have you here, and we get double prizes, as we would say in our household, because not only do we have you here on our podcast, Chip, but we also have one of your colleagues, Josh Smith. And Josh more recently joined the team, I think. That's right. Just finished your 3rd season with the Seahawks. Is that right, Josh?
That's right. Yep. I've been here since 2018.
And Josh is really the brains of the operation when it comes to sports science and player evaluation. He's worked, and the Seahawks organization works very closely with Amazon Web Services, where they've created a data lake, which is a fancy term, and an analytics ecosystem to support sports science, player development, or evaluation, acquisition, game planning, and all kinds of really, really interesting stuff, deep learning models, and just all kinds of really, really intriguing things. And so I'm really, really excited, Josh, to have you join us as well. Welcome to our podcast, Josh.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, we're super excited to have you both. And before we get into all that really super fun, interesting sports science stuff, well, our listeners know, they're all in this. We're all sitting in our homes or wherever we are doing this crazy little podcast, and we're doing that because of COVID. And so I had some curiosity about how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected football generally and the Seahawks organization specifically. And so I don't know, Chip, maybe you can speak a little bit too about, when COVID-19 first appeared on the Seahawks radar and the approach that the organization has taken to address it.
You bet. I mean, I think nobody saw a pandemic type event on the horizon. I think back of all those tabletop exercises you do for business continuity planning and risk mitigation. And somebody always throws out, well, what if this happens? And you're like, that's never going to happen. Well, that kind of event did happen. And I have to give just a world of credit to the way our organization as a whole, our management team, my technology team, how we just kind of responded versus reacting. We took each individual challenge and just found a way to overcome it. And I think we just had a recent article in the Times magazine, a Times newspaper, about the success that we had and the way we approached it. I mean, it sounds a little cliche, but one of Coach Carroll's rules for the organization, he has 3 team rules: always protect the team, no whining, no complaining, no excuses, and be early. But that protecting the team, Coach kind of leaned in and said, let's take whatever the NFL guideline gives us, and let's apply whatever else additional that we think, whatever protocols that we think would help to protect our coaches and our players to allow us to have a season. And knock on wood, we were fortunate enough to have a season, and it was the only league in North America that was able to pull that off last year. We just had a great, I guess, outcome for the way we went about our business and where we were able to overcome those challenges last year.
And I just personally want to thank you for that, because it was getting to a point where TV was getting a little bit frustrating, and just I remember, Christian, you and I were talking about when sports were coming back and how excited we were to be able to have that opportunity and possibility just to bring a little diversion and hope to individuals like ourselves.
Right. No, I appreciate that, Spencer. I mean, we miss our fans in the stadium, but we certainly appreciate the fans watching it at home on TV. It helped us keep our business alive, and we look forward to getting our 12s back in our stadium and giving us that home field advantage. Which we did really well at home, but I felt like hosting that playoff game, if we had the fans in the building, it would have been a different outcome in my mind. For those Seahawks fans out there, I'll just recap: we lost in the first round of the playoffs, but I think the 12s would have made a difference. But it was certainly a challenge. And Christian mentioned I was fortunate enough to win a CIO award in Seattle in 2020, and I think it was a part on how we went about our business from a tech point of view and supporting these things. Right out of the gate, we had to move our draft to a virtual draft, and we have this multi-million-dollar beautiful facility and a dedicated draft room, and we spend a lot of time focusing on what can make that better for communication and help the coaches and the scouts prepare for the draft. And then 2 weeks before the draft, they're like, nope, it's going to be at coach's house, it's going to be at the GM's house, you're going to have to do this all remotely. So we really had to scramble and make that happen. And I had IT people at everybody's houses wearing the right PPE protection and supporting them whatever their needs, and just facilitating communication. Big learning curve for a lot of coaches to have to get up to speed on all these video platforms. And I mean, we were using every type that was out there, and to make it happen. And we overcame it. And I think that was just to see, again, it goes back to credit to our organization, the way we were kind of resilient, the way we approach things.
Well, one of the questions I have for you, Chip, is when it all happened, nobody really knew what to expect. It's like we're all just kind of starting to invent things on the fly. And in certain organizations, that can apply a lot of pressure, and people can get stressed out learning a new way to work, remotely and everything. So, I'm curious how the Seahawks leadership really helped keep people engaged and motivated and productive when things were so uncertain.
Well, I think it started with communication, and it started from our organizational president, Chuck Arnold. I think he did a fantastic job of, because the changes were coming in, not just weekly, but daily almost at sometimes, on information we were getting from the league and protocols, and as we learned more information and what was available. So I think he just set the standard that we need to be adaptive, be flexible, and just communicate so people that are working from home don't feel like they're not connected. One of the things we were able to do was minimize workforce reductions. I know a lot of organizations and businesses around the country have been hit with that. And, we looked at all the ways we could cut costs and minimize spending with the idea that we would try to minimize the workforce reduction so that we can keep people, so that when things return to normal, we'll be in a better position. And I think he did a great job at that as well. And I think the organization leaned in, embracing the technology that we put in place. I rushed out, got thermal temperature readers so we can ensure people coming into the building facilities were the right temperature. I was able to work with one of our partners, Clear, and develop a mobile app questionnaire that just made it easier to take those health questionnaires on a daily basis. And then everybody kind of was just open to the NFL provided contact tracing devices. So when they come into the facility, they're given a device that wears, and it does proximity detection and keeps a record and log. And everybody was just open to that and no resistance. And I think it just made it easier for the organization. And I mean, and the last thing was just that, it was a quick learning curve, but everybody came up to speed quick on the video platforms and as the means or the vehicle to keep communication flowing. And I think we did a great job. We just weren't a normal kind of business that was used to remote working. So it was a big adjustment for folks that usually come to a desktop environment and used to face-to-face meetings to go to all virtual, but the organization's done well adjusting.
I have just to follow on with that for both of you. Really, we're not getting the technical stuff yet, Josh, but it seemed like in the beginning, and this is what I hear from a lot of my clients and other organizations, that people all dug in. I mean, they were just so willing to go the extra mile, work hard. A lot of them were worried about, what did the future bring? And so they were willing to do whatever it takes. But as this is really drawn on, that engagement has waned a little bit. And one of the things you said is, to help you have success, you just kept that communication to minimize that feeling of disconnectedness from working from home. How did you make sure that people felt connected? When you talk about communication, what are some ways that you were able to maintain that sense of connectedness so that engagement stayed high with everybody?
Yeah, so our management team kind of encouraged each VP and each director to go that extra mile, make sure their contact points, make sure they weren't just having their team meetings once a week, but reaching out to individuals independently, one-on-one, making sure that their needs were being met as far as keeping information flow going. Some departments were able to go down to the stadium and use the seating in a safe environment where they were able to spread out and have meetings in person and with space required, to meet the guidelines. Some departments had virtual happy hours, and when occasion they would come up with themes for their meetings. And for example, one of the things I like to do is I like to have a segment of my weekly meeting with the tech department, and we just talk about movies and TV series that are worth watching, and just sharing ideas and what's good and bad out there, and just something to lighten it a little bit.
That's
fantastic. Well, that makes me, I have to ask then, what are the movies and TV series that everybody's into?
Well, you don't want to ask from our technology department. It's
that's a trade secret. That might give an advantage to competition if we let them know what shows are motivating everybody. Come on.
Right. It's quite a eccentric bunch. So we're all over the map. So I'm not going to throw out any names.
All right. Well, should we turn to the really awesome, cool stuff? I mean, we've been watching NFL broadcasts this year. You see this Amazon Web Services advanced staff stuff, coming on after commercials and things like that. They're measuring all kinds of weird, funky things that I had never had any idea that could be measured. And so I'm really excited to kind of dive into that a little bit. And maybe you can give us a little background on it generally, and then we can kind of dive into some specific elements, Chip and Josh.
Yeah, you bet. I'll start, and I'd like to turn it over to Josh to talk about some of the details of the program. But this is my 9th season, as you were mentioning in my introduction, with the club. When I came on board, Coach Carroll and our GM John Snyder had recently joined the organization a few years ahead of me. But I think it was my 6th or 7th and my final interview when I sat down with them, and it was the last hurdle for me to be accepted into the organization. It was supposed to be a 30-minute meet and greet, just to see, for them to feel me out. I think we were an hour and a half or 2 hours into it, and we filled up 2 whiteboards just full of things that I had learned from my hockey days and the way NHL and the Vancouver Canucks were approaching data analytics, and just really getting in a deep conversation. And then it was great. And I think that was, I started to work there with the Seahawks, a week or 2 later. So it was that. That's how they looked at it, and that's where it starts. If you don't have the GM and the coach believing in it, and the organization behind you, then you can't do but so much. So they certainly believe in the value of it. Certainly, in a high level, it's kind of the pursuit of getting the athletes best prepared as we can for game day. Assisting the athletes with the recovery and providing information to the coach so they can make informed decisions on game day planning. That's really, that's my take on what it's all about, the sports science department. Josh makes up a small part of it. Myself and my role, I support that department and whatever their needs are, but they have some really good and really talented and smart folks in that team. It starts with our director of player performance and player safety, Sam Ramsden, who Josh reports up to, and with their leadership, they're doing great things. So I'll come back to more detail, but I'll take a pause there.
Chip, so when it came to that interview, did management have a vision of what they wanted to do with technology before you came, or was that something, that you suggested and brought and created that job, or was that something that you had applied for?
That's a great question, Spencer. No, they certainly had a vision that they wanted to do more. I mean, analytics in NFL are not, it's not a new concept. I mean, anybody that watched the Dallas Cowboys in the old era, they were using data analytics in advanced ways way before a lot of other teams. I felt like we were on the front edge. I would say it's hard to tell. We do a lot of information sharing among NFL teams because it's not too competitive in the business side. But when it comes to the sports science side, we're looking for that competitive advantage. So it's hard to tell where we rank among other teams, but I'd still put us in the top percent. Or top, few teams that are doing it well. They had a vision that they wanted to learn more and find that competitive advantage. The games are so tight and so little difference that anything will help, if they can find that. And their ideas is maybe we could prevent soft tissue injuries. Maybe we could get a player recovered a little better and know from a scientific point of view. I mean, a prime example, I coach Little League football and I think about it from their point of view, and I'm like, well, that player got hurt last week. He hurt his knee, but he's practicing this week. He looks good. He looks like he's running full speed, but is he really back up to full strength? And that's the kind of stuff that analytics can tell us. And, I think that's what they saw and they saw a lot more opportunity with it as well. And then, bringing people in like Josh, now we're using AI and machine learning to do even greater things.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, Josh. You joined more recently, about 3 years ago or whatever. So in your perspective coming into this thing, Chip just mentioned AI and machine learning and all these kind of fun things. How has the sports analytics element evolved, specifically within the Seahawks and then within the NFL and sport more generally?
Yeah, so in football, traditionally, most of the stats that have been used for things you watch on the field have been much more surface stats, like how often you do things on certain downs, just general tendencies. The more advanced analytics historically has been on the sports science side. So it's around keeping players healthy, return to injury, optimizing training to get the maximum amount of performance out of your players. The Seahawks, when I came in, were very advanced in that area. We have someone by the name of Patrick Ward. He's a PhD who's done some amazing research in player tracking technologies, so which is a data system that we have to track everything that happens in practice. So the players wear these little pucks they wear in their jerseys during practice, and it tracks everywhere they go on the field, to how fast they're running. And it also has an accelerometer in there to tell how quickly they accelerate and deaccelerate. And from that, you can calculate some load metrics to understand how hard they're practicing and how efficient they are moving. In 2018, the primary reason I was hired, or the catalyst, was that they released the next gen data set, which is that same type of tracking data, but for on field during games. And that used to be you would just get your team's side of the ball for games, but then in 2018 they released it so you would get every game for every player during the game. So you get every second for every player, you get 10 data points, XY coordinates of where they were, including the ball. So it's a huge volume of data, and they needed someone who could come in and help them work with that type of data and develop analytics to help with the advanced process, which is preparing for an upcoming team, to work on extending player performance using game data, and just general integrating it into our scouting and player evaluation systems, and better understanding what happened in a game and certain tendencies and things we can take advantage of as we prepare a game plan. And
Josh, that's so cool. I have so many questions, but first of all, it seems like what a great opportunity for management, general managers and coaches to be able to sit down and say, hey, Spencer, you didn't give it your all. And like, it takes away all the subjectivity, right? And so, well, I'm working hard, and it's like, no, you're not. But how do you create that baseline so that you can say, okay, we know that you've got more, if that's how it's used?
Yeah, we don't really do it that way as far as number of explosive movements. You do track that over time to understand are they working as hard as they were earlier in the year. But we do have a whole physical process where we collect a lot of objective data, including jump tests, how symmetrical a person is as far as strength at the beginning of the season, and then just some general performance metrics on the players the first day when they come in as we prepare for a season. And then we have something to refer to if they get injured, or basically understand, like, well, this is them at day one 100%, and it's something we can benchmark the rest of their season to.
So it's mostly about safety, recovery, technique, and less about, hey, Christian, you sucked out there today, you need to really pick it up.
Yeah, much more of that, much more making sure they're getting the right number of reps. It's never an issue of players being lazy. It's usually an issue of
optimizing.
We're overworking this player, or they're doing too much. We need to talk to a coach about optimizing the number of reps or the time between their reps, and making sure all that's optimized so that we have the most performant team possible on game day.
I find this so fascinating that organizations will invest tremendous resources because teams are so competitive that and player performance is paramount, and so to try to keep them in optimal condition at all times is your primary concern. I wondered if could lessons from this be applied to organizations generally. This might be a chip question as well. You invest so much resource to make sure that your key performers perform optimally. I've never been a part of any kind of company that would invest so much money in their accounting staff
or mental, emotional well-being and all of that.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, it's a great question. Business analytics is certainly a fast-growing industry, and it is within our organization as well. probably one of our fastest growing departments. And we've been putting more emphasis on that as well. But you're right, we still don't spend the kind of the money that goes into a sports science analytics department. But the returns are there. I mean, if you think some real life examples, if we're Josh touched on a couple of things. We know what the optimal training week looks like. We kind of get an indication when the coaches are working a particular player too hard or their workload's too much. And if we see something, or a player is maybe still on the recovery track, and there's a risk there if we overwork them that they could re-injure themselves, or have a soft tissue injury that could impact them from playing on Sunday. So it's hard to measure the value, because if you were able to keep one of our star players, let's say take a wide receiver, and say, look, he's only 75%. He's probably ready for Sunday. He's only 75% recover. But if we back off a little bit, we can protect him from getting hurt and make him available to play on Sunday. So that means a lot to, our win-loss opportunity on, percentage on Sunday and the game's outcome, so having that player available to play. And so, how do you put a dollar amount on that? How do you put a dollar amount on each individual victory for the team? We invest a lot into winning games with everything we do. And this is just another piece of it.
All right. Well, I've got another question.
Sure.
You mentioned, Chip, that with advanced, or maybe Josh mentioned this, with advanced stats, you're measuring positions on the field, 10 key data points, in real time. You're measuring all this kind of stuff. And then you're doing all of these other things that you're using to measure player health and safety and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It just seems like a lot.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
do you ever get to a situation where it just feels overwhelming? Like, we're measuring so much. Like, how do you make sense out of all of the data that's coming in? In the past, we didn't measure those things because we didn't have the technology to do it. But now the technology exists. You can measure probably anything that you want. So how do you keep from becoming overwhelmed with all of this information?
No, it's a great question. I'll start a reply, and then I'll turn it over to Josh to help me here. But let me clarify things. So we collect, we probably take 10 to 15 different data points on a player, helping them baseline where they are when they start, what they're doing during practice, the actual tracking, as Josh was mentioning, the puck that they wear in practice, so we can capture their movements and accelerations and things. And then we're not allowed to do any of that tracking on the field on game days. So we have to rely on the NFL to provide that information. And I totally forgot that we brought Josh on to do next gen data analytics, because he's done so much more for the organization since we brought him on board. But it's true. That's what the coaches identified as a gap, or a way that we could probably get a competitive advantage if we were able to make sense of all that information coming in. And that's why, that enabled us to get the funding to bring Josh on. So that's a different set of data that's coming in, but it's all feeding our data ecosystem, and we've recently partnered with AWS Cloud Services. We built a data lake. We're utilizing their tools and their training to help us do the visualizations and the reports that can make sense of this information. I mean, one of the proof of concepts that we've done is run video of college, run video of practice through their machine learning, and be able to ask questions and produce reports that otherwise would have taken a manually entry, or somebody manually doing it, or another body, and certainly a lot more time to do some analytics there. So before I say anything wrong, maybe Josh, you can jump in on how that's going to help us in the future.
Yeah, so two parts to this question. One, it's a lot of data, just volumes of data. We're talking terabytes of information, ones and zeros in video and in metrics that we're collecting. So we use AWS, it's a cloud provider, to manage that data and build predictive models on top of that data. So that's the technology piece. AWS has been our partner for about a year and a half now, Chip, something around there. And we use a lot of their technologies to manage our data flows, build analytics. We use their database technology. We use it to host reporting systems, build alerting systems. Their whole platform, it's basically a serverless environment where you can really do pretty much whatever you need to do. They have a lot of flexibility to scale up and scale down based on the needs of individual projects, and just use that that technology and those resources when you need it, and then you can turn it off and you don't have to pay for it when you don't need it. The other piece is, what do I need to look at? There's so much here to look at. We're a really process-driven organization. On the analytics side, the process we use to tackle these types of things is what's called CRISP-DM. It's a methodology that you use to do predictive modeling. So it's generally a process for how you answer any analytics question, and it starts with talking to your business user, or my coaches or scouts. It's not like your accountant in regular business acumen, but it'd be like a coach or a scout asks a question, and we define that question in a way that I can answer it with data. I look at what data I have that might have an influence on that question. I decide with the coach or scout how good a model would need to be predictive of the question that they have. And then I work to develop a model that can meet that threshold. And then I push that model out into production, and we leverage that prediction or that metric that we created to track things going forward, to observe the progress or understand the performance of whatever entity we're talking about. And what we try to do is we try to use this process and use our R&D and analytics department to only show coaches and scouts things that we know to be predictive. So it kind of takes out the noise and things like, like you might hear something that somebody believes that a player's favorite flavor of ice cream might tell you if he could be a 2,000-yard rusher in the NFL. We probably understand
it's
that's
a spurious connection.
Right. Yeah. We probably understand that to not be true, and we'll build analyses and try to understand that data, and before we start using that to make draft or player acquisition decisions.
So I think one of the things that you said, and that this work is doing, is aligning technology with the overall business strategy. And so that's I heard that's what you were doing. So you're making business decisions based on this data that you're gathering by figuring out the right types of questions to ask the data. So and you have to ask that question in an intelligent way for you to get the data that actually has a business impact, is what I heard you say.
That's correct. Yeah, that's exactly it. So, a lot of people have hunches, and then what we try to do is put an objective lens on that hunch and determine if you can really use that data or that understanding to make decisions that will help advance the organization.
So what then are what are challenges with this process, of any, or challenges of perhaps relying on data too much?
There's always lack of data, right? So there's certain things, certain nuances that a model won't understand or see. There's certain things when a scout is watching a guy in video, he just understands something he sees that I'm not getting in my box score data or my player tracking data, something with a technique a player might have that my tracking system can't pick up, that a scout can see with his eyes. So the most important thing for our GM and our scouts to do is take the objective data that we're trying to provide, that objective lens, take the subjective lens that a human can see with his eyes and his understanding of watching the game for 20, 30 years, and make the best decision where those things align. So
how often do you see those things, maybe where that coach's eye contradicts what the data says?
If a scout's just watching a player, it'd be pretty rare that a model could ever beat them for a single player. Like I'd say, they got it so far different than the model. It's never that far, but it does happen. Usually, like I said, it's more around like some kind of technique or something that the player's doing that a scout can recognize. What you tend to see more of is where analytics help is I can run it on every player ever. Like our best scout can only watch so many players on video and do that analysis. So what we try to do is we run it. They always obviously have a fairly large scouting organization that watches a lot of video and assesses a lot of players. We do that same analysis with data and in our metrics. We look at where the players are different and try to focus on those and try to get a better understanding of why the subjective lens might not be correct or why the objective lens might not be correct, and try to get that. So that's the real process, particularly around player acquisition in the draft. That's the whole process, is making sure we have the best understanding of a player's ability, and we put them on the board in the right place, and we understand how they can help our team, and making sure we have all the information that the coaches and scouts need to make that decision.
I bet those are some interesting conversations.
They're never not interesting. I'll tell you that.
But, I just reiterate that all we can do is provide the data. The sports science team's job is not to make the decisions, but to provide the best data possible so that the coaches and, they're paid high salaries and got all that experience, can apply that additional information to their decision making. That's what it's all about.
Have all the coaches and the managers and the professionals, have they, are we now to a point where they've all drunk the analytics Kool-Aid? For a time, there was a bit of back and forth with kind of the old school people saying, well, analytics are overrated. I know what my eyes see, and that's that.
Free money ball.
It's been around now it's been around for a while. So are we now to the point where everybody's pretty much bought in?
Well, I wish we could say it's 100% buy-in. I mean, we're trying to get the perception of the sports science department from a player point of view is, I want to do this because it helps me as a player. We want them to think of it that way. I think most of the younger players have been on a path where they've been tested and data has been a part of their life at an earlier age. Some of our older players, this is still new to them. The majority of players buy into it voluntarily. They see the benefits in it. It's not as simple as, okay, I'm not running the 40 as fast as I did during the combine, 6 years ago. And we know that's going to happen, that people are going to lose speed over time. But what they lose, they make up in experience and, their technique and, what they can do to overcome it. And that's got a lot of value to itself. So we don't cut people just based on numbers and things like that. So I think they're buying into it more all the time. We try to be as transparent with them as possible with the data. It's not hidden, it's, I think the more we can be open and communicate what we're trying to accomplish with the team and within the measurements we take, the better they understand it, the more likely they are to want to participate, I think.
One of the things you said in the beginning was that you have this app. Part of that is the tracking health and temperature and everything like that. It seems like one issue for older folks would be privacy. Just releasing so much data on our health and how we're doing, and making that transition could be problematic.
Well, it's certainly a concern with the collective bargaining agreement with the players union and the teams. It certainly comes up, and we understand that it is their personal data, that and we treat it as such. We're really
protect it.
We protect it, and I think we take all those measures and put those in place, because this information is just for us, just for our trainers, our medical staff, and our coaches to evaluate, and it's with the players' consent that we do this. So I think we give that the respect that it needs, and it is personal data.
I have another question about just this whole transition to AI. You talked about how much work it would take to have your scouts analyze all this data. And so this technology is allowing you to really analyze so much more information. AI is making such a big impact on major organizations around the world. And some of the concerns that go along with that, with all the benefits, is that, hey, maybe my job's in jeopardy. And I'd love to hear your perspective. Is this something that's actually adding to what we're doing? So it's otherwise we wouldn't be able to do it with this, or are we losing people and replacing that with robots, so to speak?
No, in our sense and in our application, I think this is just a tool that that you still need a body to ask the right questions, to set it up, to it's an
enhancement.
It is an enhancement, and it's an iterative process, I guess. So as Josh was talking about, we don't just and the sports science team just doesn't come up with the questions and the reports. They're taking feedback constantly and always adjusting, what do the coaches want to see. And, let's use some real life examples. Let's say our quarterback, Russell Wilson, loves to throw this play out of this formation. But we looked at all the practice during the week. And if he runs it out of a different formation, he's got a 75% more likelihood of completing the pass or having a successful play. So he might feel better running out of one, but the data shows something different, and maybe, it's something we didn't look at on an individual day, but if you run it through a tool and, spit out a report at the end of the week, maybe that shows you something different, information that we could use.
All right, so I've got a question for you, Josh. Continuing on this AI theme that we're on and machine learning and everything like that, one of the challenges that's been expressed by people when talking about AI generally, and again, you see this on the news with facial recognition and things like this, is the idea of bias. And I don't mean bias in a racial way here for sports, but what do you do to ensure that you're not introducing bias in the models so that they are truly objective and they are not built on erroneous assumptions?
Yeah, there are some statistical tests you can run on a population to see if you are implying a bias. We also do a lot of peer review. So obviously I'm not the only data scientist on our team. So we'll discuss our models, how we selected our populations that we're training our models on, and what assumptions we're making as we generate our features, which are the inputs we send into our models. And with those statistical tests and with this peer review, we try to flush out any type of statistical bias our models may be introducing. We also do a lot of ongoing monitoring. So generally what we'll do is we can set up simulations for past seasons using our models, and we can track that data just as a final validation. If there was bias in our training of our model that didn't apply when we executed it live. We also have ongoing monitoring once the models are deployed into production, where we're frequently checking the distribution of the data that we're sending through the model, and does it look similar to the data we trained with, and is there any drift in our predictions as far as the number of errors or the variance of our predicted values and the actuals versus what we'd expect from our training set. So we're always watching for the bias. We're always watching for errors and making sure that our process is as solid as possible.
All right. Well, I only have one question left. Well, I've got tons of questions, but one for today. Spencer, you probably have some questions too. So my final question is, well, where do we go from here? Because it seems like you can do just about anything that you want, but where do you see it heading? What's the future of analytics in your view?
Well, I'll just give you my opinion. I think it's here to stay, certainly. I think, you see us use still photography on the sidelines in NFL games now for the coaches to use. But I think, real-time video analytics for coaches and having a video analytics coach is something that's possibly going to happen in the future. If the competition committee approves that one day for the NFL, I see that being a part of the game as just another position coach would be. I certainly see all the teams developing their analytics staff and their sports science departments looking for that competitive advantage in the way they want to approach their game planning and strategy and player preparation. So I think it's here to stay.
Yep. I see data growing in every area of football. I mean, like I said, when I came in, we were really focused on player health. I see we've had a huge growth in the advance, huge growth in player acquisition in the draft. I see our scouts and coaches using data to make decisions more and more, and being very hungry for data and video as part of their processes. So I really see it growing. I think analytics teams on football teams is you could expect it to double and triple in the next few years, I'm sure.
So that's going to neutralize some advantages that you have, right? If you're in the top. So how do you keep that edge as you are trying, wanting to maintain that competitive advantage? What's next?
Yeah, you really have to stay hungry. I think player development is the next big piece. I think like there's still a lot of low hanging fruit on player acquisition and the advanced process of how to prepare for opponent and which players you should acquire. We've done a ton in player health, but I think the area where we can gain even more is how to take the players that we have and develop them and unique skill sets that we can take advantage of those players to maximize their value on our team and get the best results. I really think that's an area that we can really, that's like the next big horizon in analytics.
Yeah.
Cool.
I got another spin on this, Christian. I'll go out and way in the future. I don't know if it's 5 years, 10, 20, 30 years, but in my experience, we had a conversation one day that at some point, what if you could take the best person that ever played a certain position, put them in a hologram, put that on the field, and have your player practice against that person, right? So they're not going to get hurt. It's going to limit injuries, but they're going to see the technique and the style and the speed in which they operate. So
simulation.
A simulation, sort of. Exactly. And, I think that day's coming when you'll be able to do that kind of thing where you can take the best 5 cornerbacks that ever played the game and put them into a model that you could train your current players to work towards. So
that's why I don't let Chip watch me play ping pong. I'm afraid he's going to analyze me and try to beat me with it, my unique skills in perfect form.
I just think that day is coming. I think that's where we'll evolve to eventually. That's just my opinion on
That's so cool. Hey, so I have a question. That looks like a hockey stick behind you there, Chip. Is that right?
Yeah, that's from my Vancouver Canucks days. It was a parting gift when I left the organization. It was a fantastic ownership group. I was very fortunate to be able to work for the Aquilinis for a couple of years. We made a Stanley Cup run all the way to Game 7, lost a heartbreaker in Game 7, and so that's one of my keepsakes.
So what's your NHL team, and who do you cheer for?
Oh, I'll be a Vancouver Canuck for life. I just fell in love with the organization. They were fortunate enough to offer me a job when my Olympic contract was over, and just great admiration for the whole way they approach their business. And I just love the hockey in Canada. It's something about it. They just embrace it, and it was fun. It was a great experience for me.
I grew up as a kid in Canada playing hockey, little league. But, back in those days, it was Bobby Orr and Gordie Howe and Guy Lafleur of the, Canadians. And those were some of my heroes. But today I'm a Vegas fan. I lived in Las Vegas for 13 years. And when they just hit it big in 2017, they just really captured the heart of the community. And
yeah, they've done a great job. And certainly I give credit to their game presentation. I mean, they set the bar really high.
Yeah.
So not only NHL teams are trying to replicate, but, I think it raised the game for NFL's game presentation, in their stadiums. Because
the Vegas way, right?
They do it big and they do it great. And then they were fortunate enough to have that early success. I have to put in a plug for the local team that will be starting up here in the fall, the Seattle Kraken. We're excited about getting hockey in the Seattle market. A lot of my
fun sport, man.
Yeah, a lot of my former colleagues and along the way have joined that organization, and I think the region's really looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to it as well.
Well, my wife is a huge fan. I love it, but she's just gone bonkers for it, and they can't get enough of it. But that's so great. So that means you might be taking, the expansion might be taking some of our players out. That's no good.
It's possible. Yeah.
All right. Well, Josh and Chip, thank you so much for joining us and answering all of our crazy questions. It's really been an honor to have you on and super enlightening. Now, if people listening this podcast, if they want to learn more about the work that you're doing there with the Seahawks, what's the best way for them to reach out and contact you? Is that on LinkedIn, social media, other channels? What's the best way for them to learn more about the great work that you're doing there with the Seahawks organization?
Yeah, I would say for me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn and in all the social channels. I have a space out there. I'm easy to find. I'm under Chip Suttles, and certainly just give me patience, and I'll get back to you when I have time. But love to hear from you.
Yep, same for me, Joshua Smith on LinkedIn, and I'm on Twitter as well, at Smitty Live, but not too much activity there. But if you hit me up there, I'll be sure to reply.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Chip and Josh and Spencer. If people want to get in touch with you to learn more about how you might help them in their organizations achieve their best performance, what's the best way for them to reach out and contact you?
Go to our website, Spencer at, altiumleadership.com, ALTIUM leadership.com, or email me at spencer@altiumleadership.com.
And people can find me at gp4.com, gpfour.com, or you can email me at cnapier@gp4.com or look me up on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Chip and Josh. Listeners, please like and subscribe to our podcast, and we'll catch you again soon. Again, everyone, thank you so much.